So I'm really delighted because this evening is a part of both the William Simpson Fine Arts series and the inaugural Seat at the Table week, um, which, many of us have already been going to sessions. Maybe you went to the keynote speaker. I mean, here it is only Tuesday night, and it's just been so rich and wonderful. And now we also have our guest author reading by Professor DeMisty D. Bellinger. I just wanted to take a moment to say that this week is our, an inaugural Seat at the Table week, and my hope is that this will continue as at least an annual tradition. And I've been teaching at Springfield College since 2008. I'm an associate professor of English, and I teach literature and creative writing and first-year writing. And I have to say, this has just been one of the sort of best things that I have ever seen happen on this campus. To be able to have these rich, sustained dialogues, intellectual, artistic, and political outside of the classroom is really just been an incredibly rewarding experience already. And I'm excited by the energy and the community we are nurturing by coming together to learn and build a more equitable and just world locally on our very own campus and also beyond. Before I introduce the author, of course, there are many people to thank. So this wouldn't happen without a lot of people who've been working really hard behind the scenes. So I want to thank a few here now, and I apologize for the lack of time to thank every single person. But first, I want to thank the William Simpson Fine Arts Series Committee, and I want to particularly give a shout out to Professor Becky Lartigue, who is co-hosting tonight and has been, helping with all of the author readings, and so I'm particularly grateful. I also want to thank the Office of Multicultural Affairs, the Cultural Connections Leadership Program, and the Collaborative Council Planning Committee for making this week and tonight happen. And most notably, a shout out to Felicia Lundquist and Charisse Del Vecchio in the Office of Multicultural Affairs. You all are amazing. And of course, I want to thank all the session facilitators and attendees, and those of you who are joining us this evening. I want to just remind you of a couple events. There's so many events coming up, and I just want to remind you of a couple others. Sorry, I had my screen ready to share, and then, of course, as it happens, it got switched. So I just want to remind folks that there is this art exhibit at the William Blizzard Gallery, and you can go there in person if you're on campus, and you can also see the exhibit remotely. And so that is going on through November 24th. So if you haven't had a chance to check that out, it's really amazing. Also, we've got a lot of dance events as part of the William Simpson Fine Arts Series and as a part of the Seat at the Table. This is the one tomorrow, the next event coming up, and there's a whole slew of them. So I encourage you to go to the website and to the calendar there. And then coming up is this drive-in dance concert, a somewhat experimental concert, and you can both attend it in your car, and if you're a student, there'll be a standing area, and there's several performances. And I think that's all for now. Is there one perhaps, Becky, that you can think of that maybe I've forgotten? So stop share. So if this is your first DeMisty Bellinger experience, you are in for a treat. I first met Dr. Bellinger after she read her poetry at the 2018 Mass Poetry Festival as part of a session titled Nasty Women Poets, a reading and panel discussion of unapologetic, subversive, feminist verse. And this session was celebrating the collection of Nasty Women Poets that was collected in 2017 by Lost Horse Press, and in which DeMisty Bellinger's work appears. And I heard her read, and I made a mental note because I also heard that she teaches at Fitchburg State University, which is just down the road from us. And I made a mental note, I must bring this poet to campus. So here we are tonight, but even before this semester, Dr. Bellinger agreed to serve as our outside judge last spring for the Alden Street Review's Carolyn Doggett Awards. She was such a generous and gracious reader, and I just want to share with you a couple words she said in reading the poetry and stories by student contributors to our literary magazine. She had these words to say, quote, "You should be proud of the students here. Their stories, poems, and essays are honest and fresh. You are all doing good work there in Springfield." So she was already reading for us and already a part of our community before tonight. In preparation for her visit, my classes have been diving into her poetry and short stories, and I'm deeply grateful for the time she'll be spending with us on Friday in our classes. So Dr. Bellinger is a lot of things. She's from Milwaukee originally. She's a poet. She's a fiction writer. She's a professor. She's a violinist. She's a parent, and much, much more. She holds a Master of Fine Arts from Southampton College and a PhD from the University of Nebraska. And as I mentioned before, she teaches at Fitchburg State University. Her poetry has appeared in numerous journals and anthologies, including the Nasty Women Poets anthology I mentioned, Contrary Magazine, Bouquet Donkey, The Rumpus, and the Best Small Fictions of 2019. And her poetry chapbook, Rubbing Elbows, and you can certainly find these links and this book from her website, which is in the chat. And so this is her poetry chapbook, Rubbing Elbows, from Finishing Line Press. And it's a real delightful collection of imagined encounters with musicians such as Stevie Wonder, Whitney Houston, Thelonious Monk, and Jimi Hendrix, and others. And these poems are at turns playful and whimsical and also poignant and elegiac. They are the perfect companion, actually, under COVID restrictions, reminders of those iconic artists whose music continues to comfort us in our present. And I'm looking forward to 2021, when Dr. Bellinger's full-length poetry collection, Peculiar Heritage, will be published by Mason Jar Press, and maybe she'll be reading some poems or a poem from that. And so I just want to let you know that she'll be reading for about 20 or 25 minutes, and then we'll open up the room to questions. And at that time, we'll invite people to use the chat feature to indicate that you have a question, and then we'll invite you to unmute, or you can put your question in the chat if you prefer. But for now, please join me in welcoming DeMisty Bellinger to Springfield College.
Thank you. Thank you, Justine. And thank you, Becky Lartig, for inviting me. Also, I know she's probably not here, but I wanted to give a shout out to Ms. Donna, I probably will pronounce her name wrong, La Violette, for her help. She has helped me a lot, and she's the administrative assistant there in the English department at Springfield College. And I always want to be sure that I thank men assistants because they are important. I just one correction. I'm a violist, not a violinist. I'm not that much of a prima donna. I'm just kidding. But yeah, I play amateur. So I'm going to read some poems from Rubbing Elbows. I'm going to read a short fiction piece and some more stuff if I have time. Start my timer. Okay. So the first poem I wrote for Loving Elbows, and I don't know why I thought about it or how I came up with it, but it is actually imagining being with Stevie Wonder. And the book is about celebrities living and dead, and I think no. So this is Stevie Wonder, who is very much still alive, and it's called I Guide Stevie Wonder by the Hand. I wait patiently at the corner, watching lights. I say nothing but walk. He walks. His hand is slim and mine, cold and dry. He doesn't know it. but the color collects in the bed of his fingernails. This is where he is blackest. I guide him around a corner. The building with cinder glass obscures what's inside. I imagine rich people there. I say, rich white people, but we can't see them working. I nudge him a little and he steps a little higher, avoiding legs laying out on the sidewalk, splayed brown bagged bottle between them. Beside the bakery, we smell nuts and caramel cooking. I tell him that everything is beautiful. Cakes tiered for weddings, cookies decked out for celebrations, candies small and brown. I say, rich white people dressed in furs and cashmere, flashing bills I can't recognize. I walk him further and slow my step over ice, around dog shit. His nose wrinkles. We are near the park and I angle him. We walk across the block-long park. The grass is crunchy with winter. In the exact middle of the park, Stevie stops me. We stand still and my heart feels too violent. He says, listen, just hush. This next poem is it started off as a short story, and it's one of those failed short stories that just wasn't working. So I revised it into a prose poem, and it's about Mary Mallon. Mary Mallon is better known as Typhoid Mary, because she kept spreading typhoid fever. She had to work. She was a poor woman, so you can look at her one of two ways, that she should have quit her job in a restaurant as a cook, because she was very contagious. But then you can look at her another way and say that, but she was working. But this poem is not about typhoid fever. It's about love, like unrequited love. So love that's lost. So this is the unrequited love story of Mary Mallon. Everyone cries but Mary, who moves with lifted head above the famished crowd. Everyone is too miserable to know they're hungry. It is Mary who can't stop eating, won't stop cooking. She grows bigger, hips knocking bony patrons who come to dine but can't bring themselves to order, or worse, leave food congealing on their plates. Mary busts the table she served and hidden in the kitchen, eats their wasted food without fork, unknowingly recreating the taste of salt on his skin. So the next one is called Jimi Hendrix and I Wait Together. I know a lot of people are young here, but if you've never heard Jimi Hendrix before, I behoove you to go and listen to his music. Find him on Spotify or on YouTube or wherever people find their music today. But he was this innovator guitarist, one of the best guitarists ever. Can you hear me okay? Good. All right. Jimi Hendrix and I Wait Together. I won't use any of the cliches to describe his hands, his fingers, such as sculpted or tapered or bird-like, but I will say that they looked capable of tearing hard fruit in half, of splitting bread for a crowd. I will say that his fingers were defined as if manufactured and certain, the nails short and clean. Muscles appeared on the left hand, where I assumed no muscles could form. I could say that the color on his hands was uniform and calming, as if, too, the color of creamy Creole coffee was pertinent to his playing. You can find pictures and pictures of his smile flashing his teeth and see them bold and square and shining back at the camera. You can close your eyes and hear his goofy laugh. I don't have to describe his smile. It worked itself out in my head when I was on the toilet. The rhythm of the sentence started slow and sped up. Everything about him, musical, musical, musical. Who meets at bus stops in Wisconsin? He said, I dig the Beatles too. People don't know what me and Paul have. Who meets in bus stops in Wisconsin? We do. That is how we met. So when you guys came in, maybe you heard Thelonious Monk. Justine was playing, or Dr. Diamond was playing some Monk. He's a jazz pianist, and he liked to hear, he wanted to use the entire instrument. When we think about the piano, we think about sitting down, playing the keys, not much else. And there is some 20th century art music or classical music that people actually get back into the harp and play on the strings. And he doesn't really do that, but he does like to have those notes sustain and try to have them ring out and overcome each other. If you heard the piece Misterioso that he wrote, you can hear how those notes bleed together, and it sounds messy, but it sounds just right. It seems like he's playing wrong notes because he'll play seconds, which are two notes right next to each other, and it sounds discordant, but it's right, it's perfect. And this poem is based on that sound of the bleeding of tones, almost atonal. So this is Misterioso. It's named just like the song. Monk's goatee pointed somewhere over my shoulder. I turned and looked where it was directed me and saw, floating in the cafe, half tones and tritones and seconds bleeding through the air. I didn't think they'd look like that. I had imagined music to look as it is notated, fat balls with erect tails. But music is fuller and amorphous and polychromatic. The word synesthesia came to mind. I couldn't hear the music Monk played anymore, just the aftertones, notes not found in a single piano key, but resounding in the case and against the harp. I couldn't concentrate anymore. I followed the sound to an altar covered in purple and lavender and black, knelt on a prayer bench covered in red velvet, and, to hear clearer, took a vow of silence. One more from this book, and this is Conversations with Whitney over colas. And Whitney Houston was this diva. She's a singer, wonderful voice, one of the best pop voices ever. And she died tragically. I think it was a drug overdose in the bathtub. So, this is Conversations with Whitney over colas. Talk about the gotchiness of hotel bathtubs. Do not mention hotel bathtubs. Say nothing of hotels. Expound on the importance of family and children, but refrain from using the word future. Make eye contact and make her laugh. Do not smoke in front of her. Do not smack your teeth in front of her. Do not mention men who go freely before cameras and boast around her. Do not talk of men. Do not talk of awards or the coolness of bathtubs, the porcelain ungiving, the water hot as blood, the bubbles dissipating before the bath is over. So, those are some poems, and I wrote all those poems like between 2012 and 2016. My poetry changed a lot at 2016. Around this time of year, it changed considerably, but we'll get to that. I'll talk about that. The next piece I'm going to read is actually, it's kind of a hybrid piece. It's fiction. It works like allegory, I guess. And I wrote this when I was at, called it Artist Camp, but it was Vermont Studio Center, which is a residency for writers and artists to work, uninterrupted time and space to work. And I think, was it Michael Brown who was just killed by the police officers? And he was like the third black boy I heard about who was killed recently. And that's where this piece grew out of. And you're not going to hear anything that is triggering, so don't worry about that. But the title, Fly Away Home, comes from a nursery rhyme. And I recently wrote another short piece. It has another title from the same nursery rhyme. So I think this is one of my obsessions. This particular nursery rhyme, but it's called Fly Away Home. 3 boys left the corner store run by men who spoke English only to their customers. The boys' pockets bulged with what used to be called penny candy, but now costs too much to justify such a name. They each had 20 ounces of soda filled with caffeine and sugar in one hand and a grab bag size of chips in the other. One's hair was curly, one's hair was French braided into cornrows, and one's hair was clipped close to the scalp with a neatly professional clear part on the left side. They spoke in shortened sentences. They quoted lines from action films. Their arms and legs were long and black, one so black he shone in the sun. Like pendulums, their limbs swung to a rhythm of some clock. And this is how they disappeared. The one with curly hair and with caterpillar eyelashes saw a girl who was at least 3 inches taller than himself. He felt warmth, an uncomfortable warmth, a warmth like the urine running down his legs when he was in 3rd grade while he stood in the corner for not doing something wrong when the teacher's back was turned. Now, his friends barely nodded at his knees buckling beneath him, hardly waved or said a word when he walked away. Though the boy with the cornrows watched him trot after the girl, he watched more the girl who was the color of the sun when it's nearing its zenith, the color of dough just before it's bread. He watched her dissipate into the dust. He watched his friend follow. If someone could have asked the cornrowed boy about his friend who left, he would not have known what to say. How do you translate desire as desperate as that? His gait slowed even for a black boy who was too cool for his own momentum to go forward, so his friend with the close-cropped hair moved on ahead of him. The wind blew from the east, from Lake Michigan over him, over his hair, through the parted waves of rolls along his scalp, which exposed the skin, the same skin that perspired in the summer sun. He cooled then. He felt cold all over. He poured chips flaming and salty down his throat. He coughed, spat out red, and assured himself it wasn't blood. It was Red Lake 40, and yellow number 5 coloring all his dreams the wrong shade. He watched his friend with his nearly bald head moving on, but had he himself stopped moving, the boy with cornrows running, he took a step forward, shivered. He had stopped moving. He couldn't bring himself to take another step. His cheek, now covered in ice, cracked. The shattered surfaces of him shimmered like so many diamonds in a gleaming sun. Juicy, wet droplets of him cascaded to the warm concrete and gathered and then ran into the grate. The last boy was big. He had diabetes, and he had no fear. He reached into his pocket and pulled out melted chocolate. He ate it, licking the side of his hand where the chocolate, almost as dark as his skin, melted down. He drank his soda. He drank his soda, his head both cool and hot, dripped water. Droplets covered his scalp. He turned and looked at his friend frozen in place. He thought to call for him, but stopped himself. Why should his friend move? Where would walking take him? He watched the frozen boy with cornrows for a while, watched his skin melt in the sun, and finished his bag of chips that were Cool Ranch flavored. He didn't know what Cool Ranch was. Was that a place? Was that a restaurant? What was a ranch? Were there cows or horses on a ranch? How does this taste, this flavor of salt and sour and herbs perform ranchness? And why a cool ranch? He shook the bits of crumbs and seasoning, mostly salt, so much salt, down his throat, and threw the empty bag down on the ground. How did he disappear? Let's say he ran away. Let's say he choked on salt and sweet. Let's say that he grew old after marrying and after fathering children. Let's say that he didn't disappear, but he did. The question he asked of his friend, why should he move, irked him into his own immobility. He still had candy and he still had soda, but he didn't want it. Did he stop too? No. He simply worried himself into the ground. Black boys disappear every day. Okay. So, that was a short story, it was in the poem. I haven't read that in a while, so it's kind of, I like that piece. I hate it when I like my own pieces because, I can't really say anything about it, so. All right. This is called Tituba, and Tituba, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce her name. She was the original witch in the Salem witch trials, as a lot of you probably know. She was Caribbean, a black woman. She was enslaved, and they blamed learning witchcraft on her, and she was in prison. So this is called Tituba. I'll read it quickly. Oh. I'll tell you what you want me to, if I can be free. It is cold here, and I don't know the old England. This is all new to me. I'll tell you what you want me to if I can be free. I would traverse the coast on foot, float down the Atlantic to warmer waters. I'll tell you anything. Yes, say which. Yes, say spell. I don't care for tea or the way you speak, the way you don't sing. I close my eyes. I'll cast a spell for me and say aloud, yes, I see the waters, the color of the stones found on the shores and palm fronds waving. I don't hurt the children. I say, I do not hurt them. I say the devil came. I say anything. I say it because I think they'll uncage me. I say anything. I tell them stories of animals with the minds of men, stories of dances and cats bitten the devil's doing if they'll have me no more. I tell them because I want to be free. If they want no more with the family, no more in Salem, no more coldness, I'll tell them a story. So that poem was written after 2016. I don't know why, but I reacted to November of that year with a lot of neo-slave poems. And some of them were about made-up people, and some of them were about actual people who lived, like Tituba. Um, and the next one is actually a triptych. There's 3 poems, and this is an ode to Harriet Tubman, and she's a hero of mine. Um, and I am going to read 2 of these from this one. The first one is called "There Was Such a Glory," and that's a quote from her when she was free. She said, "There was such a glory," when she first became free. There was such a glory over everything. The world looked gold gilded, these northern trees with their shimmering leaves, this river full of mud running loudly in praise, my fingers and fingernails so scruffed and scratched and filled with dirt, the grasses growing glowed when the wind blew, these field flowers that I did not know. I knelt and smelt them. I shuddered but did not sob. It was the sun that shone, sure, but it was that I could see how the sun shone, what the light hit and what hid from it. I could feel warm and a breeze and concentrate on that. I could not look over my shoulder, and my Lord, I could sit on the grass for a minute, for minutes, and longer. And the next one in this little bit is called "Because of Kasaya." And Kasaya was her niece, who she went back to free. That's the first time that she actually went back to return to free someone. And I haven't seen a movie yet, so I don't know if Kasaya is in a movie. I hope she is. This is called "Because of Kasaya." Overheard on a network as strong as gale winds blow across city, prairie, and forest, riding river waves from the south to the north, news from a never-wanted home. Trade for comfort and unfettered life because of Kasaya, because of love, because of freedom as wide as this should be shared with her and her family. And back where glory reigns, rest only as long as it takes to catch a breath, because freedom is sweet as summer's rain and cannot be hoarded. Because of the indiscriminate love, go down over and over again. You'll be free or die. To those too afraid to continue, soon they go, upward, forward. And when the men who make the rules clash over morality and slavery, revolt against those who call themselves rebels, there is liberty, or there is death. She's pretty badass. So, I want to read a couple of more, some happier ones, I guess. So those poems, those slavery poems, are from my book that's coming out, Peculiar Heritage, and the title, of course, comes from what we called slavery a peculiar practice or a peculiar profession, and just like what grew from that. Like we're here, and when November 2016 happened, it was like it wasn't such a shock. Like, well, we bred this. This is what we come to. But this is a happier one, and it's about my mother. Oh, it's about motherhood and daughterhood. It's called Sewing Season. My mother's fingers thrip through my coarse hair, 1/2/3, 1/2/3. Thousands of ring circlets circling each other, thrip, thousands of times, braiding histories of the woman before her into my hair. My mother parts furrows unto the scalp beneath the mound of my ruly hair. Scree, she scree, charting rows of roads crossed by the woman before her into my hair. My mother's fingers recall a lineage of designs cross continents, cross ideas, crossing corn rows, thrip, 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 plaiting Africa into my hair. I am going to read 2 more poems. This one is also from that book. It's protest poems, and it's from a set of protest poems. I appreciate people who protest, but I am not that person. Before COVID even, I didn't like being in crowds like that. So this is called protest poems. I do it my own way, I guess. I keep writing protest poems in comfort, near middle class behind a desktop computer, in notebooks full of unlined, acid-free paper, in my mind on the way to work, from work, at work, in classes. I prompt my students to write, and I write along with them protest poems. Words are witty signage and pink on brown cardboard, lines marching from margin to margin. I imagine me shouting, but silently, in comfort, safely, resisting what's coming, pushing back, protesting it in poetry. I'm a Protestant in democracy. I berate my representatives. I move mountains and streets. I stop traffic with verse and rhymes and slant rhymes and no rhymes. I won't be moved from my office chair. I write letters I won't send, save for publishers of little magazines, and I'll sit sending out. The arguments I have are rhythmic. My stanzas stand and sung without music, without sound, without. And I think, okay, one more poem, and this is a love poem, and it's a happy poem, and this is from, this has nothing to do about all the other stuff. This is from, there's this jazz band, a trio called the Bad Plus, and they have this really kind of weird song that doesn't seem to ever resolve. So I have like this collection of poems, and this is unpublished. So no one has heard this before. Yay, you guys get to hear it. And the song is called You Are, and each poem in that series is called You Are. I have let myself go. This is a sickness, and I need hand-holding. My hair has grown maybe an inch when I wasn't watching or washing it. I let it grow. My various curl patterns whirl into each other across different sections of my head. My hair, not quite an afro, collects more than cascades, goes upward on the sides I sleep on, forming a 3-sided box of coils. It is winter leaves, tenaciously holding onto oak trees, browning and twisting in on themselves, hugging closely. You take me. You place me on the floor between your thighs. You work a wide-toothed comb over my head. You are a hairdresser. You are a healer. You are a mountain mover. You are godlike. You parton my woolly hair, placating me. You are here for me. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Let's show some gratitude. If you can use your reaction, clapping or unmute and clap. Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you. So we have plenty of time for questions. So if you want to put a question into the chat or just, note in there that you have a question, you can read out your questions and we can also invite you to ask. So don't be shy. Our guest author has purposely left time for questions, and here we go. We got one from Professor Tifo.
Thanks, Justine. Thank you, DeMisty, for being here. We met briefly before everything started. We were talking, listening to Thelonious Monk. Just a comment and a question. The "Where would walking take him" line gave me goosebumps. So I thought that was a particularly poignant and beautiful line.
Thank you.
Your poems that focus around musicians, particularly Stevie Wonder and Thelonious, seem to themselves be really invested in sound. The ending with the hush and the vow of silence. And I'm wondering, when you write poetry about music, are you more attuned to questions of sound than you might be if you're writing about something non-musical?
I don't know. Wow, what a question. I think as someone who has studied music, and I'm by no means a good musician. You don't want to hear me play any solos, but I think I am more attuned to rhythm and how sound works, um, and in all of my writing. Even in my prose, I tend to think about the rhythm of it, or how is it going to move the reader on to the next line or the next point. And we can do things in prose or poetry like white space to make people stop and reflect, but I think you can do it better with words or the placement of words on page. Um, One of the things that I liked about writing about music directly is that I can directly comment on the music, like I did in those two poems that you mentioned. And I spent a lot of time listening to their music while working on those poems and um, trying to interact or understand their music from a writer's point of view, which is a lot of fun. And I don't know if I answered your question.
No, absolutely. So you actually listen to their music when you're composing those poems?
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
That was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for that question. So Arlinda, if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Sure. Congratulations. This was a fantastic presentation. All the readings were quite inspiring and insightful. And I just wondered, I heard the reader read several times fingernails in her writing. And I just wondered whether there's some meaning behind using those terms in particular. So I just wondered if they represented something specific.
I'm going to ask my therapist and then I'll get back to you. I didn't know that I was doing that. I wonder. When I was in college, we used to talk about like people who are so reflective or just like into themselves, or like the existential, that you notice things like your fingernails and how it grows. I wonder if I was if there's like something working in my mind, I can get to that, but I don't know why I put that in. I would have to think about that. That's kind of astute of you to see that or hear that, and you sound like an English major.
Actually, I'm an academic advisor, but I love
Okay.
words.
Okay.
And your words were quite inspiring, like I said before. When you were reading that, I started to look at my own fingernails and wonder whether fingernails represent growth, movement. Well, it could mean anything, right? So I just wondered if you had a specific meaning behind it. So, but thank you.
Yeah, sure. I want to I will probably go back and look through that because I'm curious now, and I wonder if it's like those moments where you are quiet enough or you can genuflect that you will notice things like that. But okay. And when I was talking about eating food, for instance, I love food. If you can't tell, I'm a big woman. I'm 200 pounds. And when I was a kid, I ate like Flamin' Hot Cheetos all the time. That was my food, and I used to love it when it would collect in my fingernails. It's so gross, and I'll just eat it out of my fingernails. You didn't need to know that about me.
Nice.
That'll work its way into the next intro for reading. Well, thanks for that question, Arlinda. And Haley, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Sure. First, I really enjoyed reading your poems in my English class. I really love them. But I found it really interesting that you brought up synesthesia because I have a friend who has it, specifically related to music and words. And so she writes and is a songwriter. But I was wondering if like you yourself have like dealt with it, and if you do, like how it portrays itself to you.
I do not. I wish I did. When I heard that it exists, I was like jealous that someone I first heard about it, I think in 2012. And I was kind of just intrigued, and was another writer who had it. So I think she was getting annoyed with me because I kept asking her questions. I think the most that I get out of listening to music is textures. I'm not sure if other people get textures from listening to music, but I certainly do. But no, I don't have it. And I like the idea of like sounds having colors or music having certain elements that we don't associate with it, or numbers having colors. So it's kind of neat. I'm glad you picked up on that.
Thanks for that question, Haley. Charisse Del Vecchio is here. Charisse.
Hello,
Nice.
here I am. Thank you so much for this. This space has been wonderful and such an incredible way to wrap up a long day of learning and community, and just a wonderful space. So thank you for cultivating this. And I do have a question. So I am a therapist and I work with people across the lifespan, but something that is often a vehicle for healing with the people with whom I work is writing, poetry or narrative, whatever comes to them, and this comes up a lot, especially with identity relevant traumas. And so I'm curious about your ideas on sort of writer's block, and how what do you do when you experience that? Offer to someone who's experiencing that and who's wanting to use writing as a therapeutic process, because I can use my psychology to help them with that, but you have the artistic perspective that I'm lacking. So you would say.
I don't believe, and my students hate me when I say this, but I don't believe in writer's block. I don't think there's such a thing. I think there's always ways that we can inspire ourselves to write, and it may be that sometimes that we are forcing ourselves to write something that is not ready to be written yet. But ways to make yourself write when you have nothing to write about. Like I mentioned, listen to music, and I don't know if everybody did this when they were a kid. When you listen to music, you just kind of let your pen go with the music. You can do that with writing too, just like write words that come to mind. But also ekphrastic poetry. So seeing images and just having people, and it doesn't have to be poem, because ekphrastic literally means like writing from image or something like that. I forget what it literally means. I should have said that. But it is writing from art or something visual. So you can show images and have people write, like, what do you think about it, or how does this make you feel, or anything like that. I do that with my own students also. I am not a therapist, but and I get some pretty good poems out of that. In fact, recently I was doing a workshop, and one of the students in the workshop decided, instead of using a famous artist's work, she used one of her mother's paintings, and she has a lot of her mother's paintings. And we talked about maybe she can do that, like a little collection of her mother's work, and just writing from that. Another thing I was thinking about recently, and there's less opportunity for this, I think, with COVID, is like if you're just out in the world and you see something that's odd, like a person doing something weird or a squirrel, just riff on that and just keep writing from like, what is this person doing? There's this essay that I read recently. It has a long title, something like Two Men Carrying a Toilet into Taco Bell. And so this writer actually saw two men carrying a toilet into a Taco Bell. So she's trying to figure out, why are they doing this? They don't look like plumbers. What's going on? I think that's something else to get people to start writing. So I think sometimes when we try to force things to write, just something horrible to say to students who have things like a paper that's due, right? But sometimes it just doesn't come. So maybe you just write around it until you get to that point where you can write the thing itself. Does that help?
That helps a lot. Thank you so much. I appreciate the insights and the techniques.
Great question. And the exhibit, what we made during COVID, has an ekphrastic collaboration. I just thought I'd mention that if you haven't seen already. Professor Montgomery has written poetry and then also done some artwork, and her friend, who I'm blanking on her name, also did that. So Robert, you have a question? Would you like to unmute?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed so much of the work that you shared today. I did notice there were a bunch of different themes in what you were talking about. So my question really is about your projects and how you kind of tackle your creative projects, because there were so many different topics between your books and your short stories or whatnot. How do you kind of manage your creativity into completing your different projects? Do you have 700 projects open at once? Do you kind of do one thing and then the next?
Yeah, I do generally work on more than one project at once. And it's kind of like what I was saying to Charisse, is because if I don't think that I can work on this, then I'll go to that. That's part of the reason. But another reason is because people will ask you to write something, and so you drop it, or things come to mind. So, for instance, things come to mind that you want to write, as well as the thing that you're writing. For instance, I am working on an ekphrastic project of black people or people of color, really, and in old paintings and artwork, like the Black Madonna or Gauguin's paintings. And that's something I'm interested in, working on for a long time, and I know that I want to take time with it. At the same time, I am working on love poems, which are like awkward, not stereotypical love poems. I don't know how to describe them. And I am working on a collection of short stories, a novel, and some critical work now. I think it's like anything else, like a musician, or I have to pick up musicians or artists, anybody. They're working on more than one project at a time. How I manage it is really hard to manage it during the school year, because I'm teaching and I have kids who are in school, and there's so much that is going on. And I get the question sometimes, like, how do parents do this? How do you write, especially from younger parents? And the answer is you don't sleep. You just get to sleep a lot of times, which is not very healthy. But yeah, and how do I divide those things? I don't know. I think that I want to do them all equally as much as the other one. So I do. I don't know if that answered your question. I feel like I'm a horrible question answerer.
It's not true. Robert, are you good, or did you want to do any follow up?
No, that's great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question. And Rowan, are you there? Do you want to unmute?
Okie dokie. First, I want to thank you for your reading. It was lovely. And that I am tempted to ask you an obnoxiously heady question about something like prosodic invention or uses of tropes, but I really am interested in the petty question of who are some of your favorite poets?
I was going to read Lucille Clifton when I came here, and I forgot that I wanted to read one of her poems, because the reason why I want to read Celebrate With Me, or Won't You Celebrate With Me? Won't You Celebrate With Me? And the reason why I want to read that is because I'm very impressed with your events around A Seat at the Table. This is the inaugural year. I love that idea, and I'm happy that your school is doing that. Springfield College is doing that. But she is one of my favorite poets. Look for her, Lucille Clifton. Lucille Clifton. I was very honored to meet her a couple of times in life, and but look for her, Google her, or DuckDuckGo her, or whatever. And there's a few poems that you can hear her read. I think you should listen to her read. Her reading voice is just wonderful. So that's one. Gwendolyn Brooks. Let me think of her as Mama. Toni Morrison. Alice Walker, although she says some things that are pretty problematic lately. Ken Casey, I like a lot. There's a lot of Bob Hitchcock I like. There's a lot of writers that I do love, but when I think about poetry, Lucy Clifton comes up first. Camille Dungy, who is still alive and still producing great work, younger writer, she's great. Patricia K. Smith, that's someone else I think that you should look for. She's great. A lot of women writers. I know I'm mentioning a lot of women. When I was very young, I had the bad habit of thinking that white men were the people to look to. And I'm not saying that, I will name my white men with that I love, like Bob Hitchcock or Raymond Carver or Ted Kooser. But the problem is that when I was growing up, that's what you got. You were told that these are the good writers that you were supposed to read. So I had this horrible idea as a kid that I want to be a writer, but I don't want to write like a woman. I'm like, what is that? I almost swore, sorry. Like nowadays, when I hear things like that, like, what are you, crazy? What's wrong with the way that women write? We're awesome. So I try to read a lot of women and a lot of people of color. There's a lot of great Native writers too. Natalie Diaz is just great. And I think about people who have done like horrible transgressions, like Sherman Alexie. Why did you do that? I don't read him so much anymore. Joy Harjo is great. So yeah, I gave you too much. I read all the time, and that's one of the things I suggest for any writer. Just read as much as you can. Read everything.
Yes, great advice.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for that question. And is it Sharon Loveglass? Would you like to ask your question? Are you still here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Great, thanks.
I mean, someone said it was already answered, but I kind of had like a further question to the other answer. So some of your stories were so detailed. Like I felt like I was really there. I mean, the fingernail also, I thought of, and I thought I like maybe figured it out, but I don't know. But I just wanted to know if you had any like. It seemed that a lot of your subjects were based off of maybe media, but I was wondering. I mean, I know the music, of course, because that's huge. But I was just kind of wondering if anything like the one about your mom kind of was personal. And I just wanted to know if you were able to find more inspiration through personal stories and how your pieces came to be versus finding it from media. Like where your passion really grew and found where you loved your writing.
Okay, I think that's a good question. So I am interested in all art, so I think that's why I'm working on an ekphrastic project with art, but also the things that I do with music. As far as personal goes, it's really hard for me to write about, but not for the reasons that most people expect. It's just that I'm a very boring person, so not much happened in my life that I can think of to write about. It's pretty boring, but every once in a while I do write about people directly, write about love directly, and more often than not, when I do that, I do it in nonfiction than in fiction or poetry. I have written a couple of essays. For instance, I wrote an essay about my aunt who I really appreciate. She helped raise me, but at the same time, there's like little bits of real life of my own life that would come into my work. Like, for instance, when someone mentioned the fingernails and I talked about the Flamin' Hot Cheetos, that's me in there, but it's not about me. It's just so. And my husband, when I read anything that has like a couple or a guy that will say something that kind of rings like he's like, "This is about me." Like, no, it's not. You're not that great. Stop being so vain. It's not. But I do still a little bits of him to put in work. So there is that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we do have time for one, maybe 2 more questions. So if someone wants to get in the last question, but Robert has another question in the meantime. So go right ahead.
Thank you. So keeping in mind that this event is part of the Seat at the Table programming, I really did appreciate your perspective about protesting and trying to figure out your own voice for protesting, whether that's in a physical format or whether it's through creative means. So I was wondering if you could just share your process with protesting a little bit more through your creative means.
Okay. So it is through writing very often. And I do, like, I will write our senators. Ed Markey probably knows me pretty well by now just from letters. And I will write people like that, or I'll tweet at people. But like taking to the streets, with the last Black Lives Matter marches, I was very proud of what people were doing. I was also very worried because we're in the pandemic, but people were, for the most part, safe. They were wearing masks. What I did instead was join as guest editor on a lot of magazines, accepting work from BIPOC, as we say now, or Black and Indigenous people of color. I only accepted projects that paid the writers and artists. Because a lot of times, I'm going to tell you, I think maybe I got paid for one of the pieces that I read tonight. So a lot of times writing just is not paid work. It's exposure, whatever that is. But, well, I should say all writing, but literary writing, like the writing that I do. And I haven't started making money from writing until like the last 5 years. So I made sure if I was going to be accepting people of color as writers or artists, that they will be paid. And that is my way of, I guess, protesting, or just like bucking the system. And I enjoy doing that. One of the first time in my lives, I was on an editorial board that was full of people of color. The editor-in-chief was white, but it was his magazine, so he invited us all, and as I guess as guest editors, and it felt good, and it felt good to give out money. The person who won that contest, the biggest prize is $500, which is a lot of money for a poem, and everybody else got. If you got published, you got $50. So it was good for writers, and most of the time, poems you get $10. That's like, oh my gosh, I got $10. You actually got paid for it. So I think it could come through in that way, and I also think it could come through in just the way that you live, the way that you vote, and the way that you treat other people, and support those who do protest. And I thought that it was really impressive that people were paying bail, like raising money for bail. That was good, or raising money for food to pass out at protests. So I thought those were good ways, but no, I'm not a protest person. I don't go out and do it that way. And I know that there's some people who think, like, look down on me about that, but what can you do?
All right. I think that was our last question. We are at 8:31, so that was actually quite perfect. Wow. So let's once again show our gratitude with applause or the reactions. And thank you so much, DeMisty. Really, really appreciate this. It's been a wonderful evening.
This is fun. Lots of great questions.
Yes. So take care, everyone. Be